The member from Essex.
Thank you very much, Speaker. My question is to the Acting Premier. Speaker, the Auditor-General said that she was concerned about how the Liberal government was handing out job creation dollars without any accountability or without even checking whether the money was needed in the first place. The question is quite simple, Speaker. When will the government be appointing the arm's-length boards and independent advisory committees for the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund and the Eastern Ontario Development Fund?
Thank you.
Minister of Economic Development, Employment and Infrastructure.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for that question, and it's a question I look forward to addressing. But, Mr. Speaker, I think that's important as well to recognize when a member asks a question that's a legitimate question and when sometimes members get up in righteous indignation when they have no right to do so. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to compare your question to the question of the Leader of the Opposition yesterday. When he got up in righteous indignation, here's a member, Mr. Speaker, who served in a federal government that supported 3,000 jobs in partnering with Oakville through those very same business supports. 8,000 jobs in Guelph through those very same business supports. 8,000 jobs in Cambridge and Woodstock. Where was the righteous indignation then? But, Mr. Speaker, this takes the cake. I recall being in Barrie, Mr. Speaker, at the launch of a data centre through a partnership with the federal government, and I have a photo with myself, Mayor Lehman, and the Leader of the Opposition, and his smiling face, Mr. Speaker, cutting a ribbon with us, to support programs.
Be seated, please. Be seated, please. Start the clock. Order. Supplementary.
Speaker, I appreciate that the minister considers my question as legitimate. I would appreciate a legitimate answer to the question. Speaker, in 2012, MPPs passed legislation to ensure that the Eastern Development Fund and the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund would have independent boards, they would have local advisory committees, and annual reporting to create much-needed transparency in this House, but the government is refusing to put into action those sections into law. This is just another example of the government failing on the fundamentals of governance. After last week's Auditor-General's report, it's clear that the government isn't up to the job to managing job creation in this province and making sure that those funds work for Ontarians. I'll ask again, Speaker, when will those independent boards be appointed in this House?
Minister.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the patience of the member opposite and giving me the opportunity to state something I was looking forward to saying today. But the member realizes, and in fact we've worked with colleagues on his side of the House as well, it's really important that we strike the balance with our regional economic development funds, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that we're responding to those communities in a timely fashion. We've worked very closely with local municipalities, including his own area of Windsor. And, Mr. Speaker, we have a process that we've put in place that is highly accountable. For every dollar invested, Mr. Speaker, there has to be jobs created, and if they're not, those dollars are clawed back or not flowed in the first place. There's a very stringent process of consideration for these projects, Mr. Speaker. They are not politically just determined in any way. There's a process that comes through. And, Mr. Speaker, I'd be happy to talk a little more to the member offline about this.
Thank you. The member from Renfrew will come to order. Final supplementary.
Thank you, Speaker. Quite simply, in 2012, this House passed legislation to ensure that the Eastern Ontario Development Fund and the Southwestern Ontario Development Fund had independent boards who would make up the choices to ensure that job creation dollars helped families in our communities, not just government friends. Does the government think that job creation funds need less oversight, less independence, and less transparency?
Leader, second time. Minister.
Speaker, those types of allegations, when I spent hours working with this member and talking to this member at estimates, explaining the very stringent process we go to. for him to make those allegations after knowing that we have a very stringent, a very accountable process, Mr. Speaker, is really not a fair allegation at all. And, Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is I do not intervene and have not intervened in any recommendation that's come forward through the Eastern Ontario Development Fund or the Southwestern Development Fund. They work their ways up through the communities, Mr. Speaker. They're open funds and we encourage corporations, companies to take access to them, and communities. Mr. Speaker, communities in Southwestern Ontario, in Eastern Ontario, are very pleased with the administration of these funds. I suggest that you listen to them as well.
New question.